Alright, so this is the introduction to Chapter 2 of our Flashback, A Brief History of Movies book, leading out with the introduction. Alright, let's get started. First, I'd like to make a note that this is considered the era of Nickelodeon. Alright, now that you know what a Nickelodeon is, let's talk a little bit about what they were. They were described as low class, disgusting, cramped, they smelled bad, the little tin box in the back created a lot of heat. It was not what you would call a high class area. So it wasn't so much that it attracted the lower class or that it was happy for them to go there or whatever. It was just that the middle and upper classes would not be caught dead, tainting their reputation by going to a Nickelodeon. Also, it's important to point out that people who liked opera and stage and all the lovely things found it very distasteful to be in a Nickelodeon. There was even a point where there was a law that was passed that you could not place a Nickelodeon within 200 feet of a church. That's how bad Nickelodeons were perceived by society. Okay, so at this point, people believe Nickelodeons to be simple amusement, nothing more than cheap entertainment. But there was a select few number of people that believed that movies could become a weave in the national fabric, and that they believed that there was more potential for movies, more than just Nickelodeons. Alright, now we have this nobody, Griffith. He's a failure as a writer, failure as an actor, loves the stage, and finds that movies are a very distasteful medium to the polite, dignified opera and stage, and it's almost an insult to his profession. So, Griffin gets a job with some of the movie places. He doesn't really like the job, but money's money. He starts out as stagehand, actor, he acts in a few different films, he enjoys that, that's great, that's fun. But for the most part, he still pretty much hated film in that medium. Moving on, Griffith realizes that his passion is not, or his talent is not in front of the camera, but behind it. He ends up directing his first film called The Adventures of Dolly. It's about a chubby little girl, and it was fantastic. Anyways, that was his first film. Gotta move along. Because Griffith had no formal training or education in the world of film and that art or genre, he wasn't bound to any of these standard ways of doing things behind the camera. So when he made a film, he would experiment and try different things, and the first film that he was noted for by a magazine was The Sands of D, which contained 68 different scenes. When normally the other films that were coming out around the time would have anywhere from 11 to 30 something scenes. That was an obscene amount of scenes. Then there's another shocker of a film that he comes out with that has to do with robbers holding up a woman in a house, and her love is rushing to her aid, and they're trying to get there before the dude's trying to get there before the lady gets attacked, and everyone's going to be happy and everything. This contained 100 different shots. Which again was just way above everything else that had happened during that era. He took things that other actors or directors would only use if it was necessary to include it in the plot, and he used it as standard utilities. A close-up shot. Oh, it's all been taken. Pick me up a book about new sense. He would use that for more than something that you would need to show for the plot. He used a close-up to create meaning and to show people what was going on, to show feeling and emotion. Alright, we're slowing down. Let's get this ball rolling. Alright, here we go. He did other crazy things like parallel editing. Crazy. Then the floodgates opened. The Birth of a Nation. Griffith's like slam dunk, grand slam, home run, whatever you want to, sports metaphor you want to throw in there. Whatever. Like, that was like his top-notch deal. Was fantastic. Blew everything out. What I gather about Birth of a Nation is that it was racist and that it was harsh and slanted, and it was fantastic. People loved it, and yeah. As far as making money on films, Birth of a Nation was a very lucrative film. It cost about $110,000 to create and earned him about anywhere from $10 to $14 million. I think that's a huge spread. I don't know where they came up with that numbers, but whatever. But that's like a 1,000% return or something like that on your money, or 10,000% return, which is really good. It's a really good return on your investment. Followed by Birth of a Nation, there was kind of a flop that happens, and it was an unfortunate time-wise flop that couldn't really be helped. He creates a film called Intolerance. Now, described in the book, it's 4 storylines wrapped into kind of one movie, and towards the end, they're cutting scenes so fast, it's almost subliminal messages because of how fast things are cutting, under a second for some scenes. And apparently, they elected Woodrow Wilson into office, and he was on a peace platform, everything was going to go great, and then he starts producing this film called Intolerance. And then in 1915 is when it was started. 1916 is when it came out. In 1915, America was all for peace. Woodrow Wilson was elected into office on a peace platform. But now that it's 1916, everybody's thinking that war might not be such a bad idea. But back in 1915, when peace was a good idea, that's when he started the Intolerance movie. So now that it's come out in 1916, it talks about forgiveness and we should tolerate everyone in peace, and that's not where America's at right now. It was just poor timing. It wasn't really his fault. There was people that argued that it was too complex of a storyline, but it wasn't any more complex than that of Birth of a Nation. So it's argued that that is not why the Intolerance didn't do well. And for the record, Intolerance didn't do well. It says that it was kind of a flop. It was an ultimate flop. And after, oh my goodness, 7 minutes, I think we're going to have to call that a day. Alright, there was the introduction to Chapter 2.